Hello and welcome to the first of a new series to which I've given the rather dangerous title, unwise probably, of Dr. David's Daily Dose. It's not entirely serious, of course. It is a silly way of describing my response to the daily news. It's playing on, of course, my doctorate and the fact that we usually now think of doctors as being medical doctors, but this isn't the real medicine of today. I will be invoking the old pre-modern medicine, so my comments will savour of the kind of treatment that doctors, God help us, or at least God help our ancestors, used to hand out. You know, there will be purgatives and emetics, and there'll be bloodlettings, more popularly described as phlebotomy. There will be trepannings, there will be amputations followed by cauterization. That sizzling flesh. And really, if I get absolutely furious, as I am today, there will be the cutting for the stone. That is the removal of a kidney stone, remember, whilst you are fully conscious. It was done, and he survived, to Samuel Pepys, the great diarist. I think it was done also to the French composer, favourite composer of Louis XIV, Lully. Anyway, Lully actually wrote a suite of music called On Being Cut for the Stone, and it begins all calm and gentle. You know, your friends come and see you and sort of offer you encouragement, but probably think they're seeing you for the last time. Then it gets a bit more tense as you are. Each movement is stage of the process. It gets a bit more tense with the movement described as the patient is tied down with silken ropes, and then it reaches its climax, the moment of incision, a single high 20-30 second note on the violin that pierces and cuts the ear, you know, as it would have the flesh. Anyway, so what have I got cross about this morning? I've got cross about the reports in both the Times and the Telegraph. Let's name names and shame them. The reports in both the Times and the Telegraph of the return of the Blue Boy, Gainsborough's famous painting, to England for the first time since it left these shores exactly 100 years, well, 101 years ago, in 1921, when it was sold by the Duke of Westminster to the great American railroad magnate and collector of all things English, and indeed a man who believed he really was more English than the English, Henry E. Huntington. Let's talk about the painting first. Let's try and talk about it rationally as opposed to the Times and the Telegraph. Both of those, lots of speculation about who is the boy. Short answer, we don't know, though it may have been the studio assistant called Gainsborough Dupont. Lots of stuff about his going to the dressing up box, but he was probably really a street urchin, and we can then imagine him taking all the fine clothes off and going and playing with the other boys. And by the way, Gainsborough liked painting buttons. This is the stuff that gives art history a disgracefully bad name, and that should give journalism a bad name. Because listen to the actual Times report, the Times itself, going, you know, since the 18th century, when the painting was first exhibited at the Royal Academy. Listen to it. Courtly grace and serene carriage of a people who know themselves a great people, and who were not ashamed to own it. Now, what on earth to do with the portrait of a boy who's been attired from a dressing-up box? Well, the answer is, of course, he wasn't attired from a dressing-up box. What he's doing, he is wearing that wonderful blue silk, amazing blue silk, wonderfully rendered by Dupont. That's the only, by Gainsborough. That's the only thing we can all agree on. He's wearing what's called Dyke Costume. Why then the reference to a great people? Because there is a serious attempt at making Dyke Costume the costume of the court of Charles I, when of course the great court painter is Sir Anthony Van Dyck, you know, and the men are all in these gorgeous tight-fitting jackets and breeches, with the huge lace-trimmed collars and the long elegant hair, and the women swathed in impossible masses again of wonderful silk and perfect pearl necklaces around their necks and so on. There's a serious attempt at making the court dress of Charles I, the so-called Van Dyke costume, listen to it, English national dress, which is why, of course, there is the reference to the grace and serene carriage of a people who know themselves a great people. Why otherwise, with the portrait of a boy, a reference to the notion of a great people? So here we are. This lad is a kind of shown as a pioneer, as a model, as a youthful aspirant to this greatness of England invoked by a new form of national dress. Because what did actually people wear at this point of the 18th century? Well, the upper classes, of course, they dress à la française. They dress in the French fashion, which for the upper classes is known as the habillé, which is the fantastically embroidered, frilled, laced dress that we're all familiar with from the court of Louis XV and the court of Louis XVI. But of course, France is the enemy, and there's a general sense that we should be reacting against it and doing our own thing, and so the idea of an English national dress, the most beautiful and distinctive period of English costume, the court of Charles I, Charles I being reappraised anyway with the new Tory royalism of George III himself. So there's that idea. English national dress. Can you imagine, gentlemen, if it had taken off? Can you imagine Murrayfield and an England-Scots rugby match? The Scots in kilts and you in Van Dyke costume. But that reference to the Scots in kilts isn't simply a joke. Of course, exactly at this moment, through the Highland regiments of the British Army and paintings by people like Bottoni in Rome, I don't know whether Gainsborough himself actually, I can't remember whether he paints people in Highland dress, but Highland dress is being adopted in the British Army. There are Highland regiments and it's being styled up, and if you actually look at it, it's clearly being remodelled rather than just, the rough plaid of a peasant, of a crofter, which is what it was originally, and the dress of the desperately poor. It's being turned into a version, an 18th century, a politized, a polished version of the dress of a Roman centurion. Look at it, and that's clearly what it's all modelled on, with the perpetual classical models which are at the back of people's minds, especially in this period. Clearly, it doesn't take off. We can all heave a sigh of relief. And in fact, the great novelist, the Fabian, H.G. Wells, I think it's in his History of the World, makes the wonderful comment that one of the glories of being English is that we don't have national dress. Do you know what? That's not true. We do. In the same way, we have our own particular language, but we almost forget the fact because everybody else speaks it very often now better than we do. But similarly, there is a thing called English national dress. It is the well-cut Jermyn Street suit, made not out of the silks and satins of either Van Dyke costume or of the French habillé, but of good, solid English broadcloth. And that was the thing which actually starts to come in the late 18th century. A pioneer, actually, is George III. He invents the Windsor Uniform, which again is a plain, heavy blue cloth, but with red facings. There's a version of it still worn by the royal family. I remember vividly on one occasion Prince Charles boasting to me that he could still fit in the Windsor uniform that had been made for him when he was in his late teens. So there we are. But it's plain, solid cloth. What is it derived from? Well, obviously, it's not derived from the French fashion at all. It's something very different. It is derived from sporting dress. It's derived actually from the riding jacket, from riding dress or hunting dress, particularly hunting dress. And it's therefore, the jacket is differently cut, there's room in it, you can actually move in it, you can go outside in it. Because of course, a French courtier couldn't possibly step outside, or an English courtier or an English gentleman couldn't possibly walk in the streets dressed like that. The mob would tear you to smithereens. The dress is too valuable, the jewels, the lace, everything else. The riding dress is practical, it's indoor, outdoor wear, and it's subject in the early 19th century to that process of styling up. The styling up of the Regency period, and it's turned from the outdoor dress into a new form of indoor dress, the frock coat. And again, there is a great portrait. There's the portrait of George IV by, I can't remember if he's Prince Regent or has actually become king at this point, by Sir Thomas Lawrence, which shows him in the plain cloth frock coat. And there's something else that's very striking about it. It is black, in complete contrast to the brilliant colours of the Blue Boy or of the lavish colours of the habillé. It's black. The new serious look. The new serious look pioneered by the English gentleman, which says we are serious. We are men of business. We do things, because of course black was traditionally clerical dress, and what you're saying is we are not simply idle courtiers, not even George IV, who has to be one of the most courtly and the most idle people who've ever even occupied the throne of England, wearing the plain, handsome, well-cut black dress. So that is what you could actually, if you actually known anything, those two journalists in the Times and the Telegraph, that's what you could actually have written about the picture. It might also, by the way, have been worth saying something about Henry E. Huntingdon himself, and indeed the magnificent Huntingdon Library and Museum, which he founds in San Marino, which is a very grand suburb of Los Angeles. Henry E. Huntingdon was a railway railway magnate, not of the great transcontinental lines. He ran the astonishing regional, I suppose, the equivalent of Los Angeles public transport railway, which linked together the far-flung suburbs of Los Angeles to the centre, and which meant that Los Angeles, I know this is unbelievable, but believe me, had probably the best railway system in the world, thanks to Mr. Huntingdon, who made his vast fortune from it, until it was all bought up by General Motors in the 1940s and torn out, which turned LA back into the city of the car and only the car. But Huntingdon's taste, Huntingdon thought, as I said, he was English. He might even have been what he thought he was. He might even have been a bastard descendant of the Hastings Earls of Huntingdon, which is what he actually thought. So his taste, and this he, by the way, has in common with so many of the Golden Age billionaires, the robber barons of late 19th century America, he wanted to be an English gentleman. He didn't come over to be an English gentleman. Astor, of course, famously did, saying that America was not a country for gentlemen, so he transferred himself to England. Huntingdon remained in America, but he brought England to LA, brought England to Los Angeles. He brought not simply the Blue Boy, paying this vast fortune for it, but another array of astonishing English paintings of the late 18th century, including Reynolds' vast flawed masterpiece, because he used experimental techniques so that the paint is blistering and crumbling, that huge study of Mrs. Siddons as the tragic muse, all of that, dominating the room. And the interior of the library is a study of Georgian revival. The whole building exudes England, because as well there's a wonderful manuscript collection. It contains the Ellesmere manuscripts, which are the sole surviving transcripts of sections of the council registers of Henry VII. I've sat there and used them. The papers of the significant papers of the Hastings Earls of Huntingdon, first Lord Hastings. This is where we get all the knowledge, by the way, of the Lord Hastings, who is executed by, is dragged to execution, dragged to murder, really, by Richard III, Richard then Duke of Gloucester, from that fateful council meeting in the Tower on the eve of the seizure of the throne and the murder of the princes. Um, all of those papers are there as well. And the atmosphere is deliberately England. Working there was fascinating. I've no idea, I've been back in 20 or 30 years. Then there were only English papers. There was only the Times, of course, still broadsheet, hanging there on one of those rods as in a London club. There was, of course, the Times literary supplement. There was tea, proper tea, actually made in a teapot, not dunked in lukewarm water in a beaker, in a glass beaker as it usually is in America. There were china cups, there was milk, there was cream. It was England exported. I remember it very fondly. They couldn't have written that because they wouldn't have known about it. But if you're ever in LA, go there. It is the most extraordinary experience. You won't, by the way, be able to couple it with my joint experience. When I was working there, I was actually staying at the complete opposite in intellectual terms, the Caltech, the California Institute of Technology. I was staying in their faculty club, which is this amazing Mexican-Spanish revival building with a wonderful open courtyard where you eat really rather well. These are faculty clubs in America, not the abominable canteens that English provincial universities have. And it was always explained to you as you dine beneath the perfect twinkling skies and whatever, that if somebody emptied the soup in your lap, you shouldn't complain too much because they would be a future Nobel Prize winner. All of the memories flood back, brought back by Gainsborough's Blue Boy. But do remember Dyke Costume, national dress, and finally the glory of English and England in not having it. Hello, and thank you for watching David Starkey Talks. If, as I very much hope, you're enjoying them, why not become more actively involved and join my members club? As a member, you'll be able to take part in the members-only weekly question and answer session, suggest topics for forthcoming videos, and have priority booking for my forthcoming live events. And while you're at it, why not have a look at the store page on my website, davidstarkey.com. There you can purchase T-shirts and other merchandise, buy signed copies of my books, and, if you're feeling brave and a bit flush, even arrange to take me out to lunch. Thank you once again for watching. I look forward to hearing from you and to welcoming you to my members club.